other way of knowing, this other form of evidence for this that we haven't talked about yet that I think is important to bring up here. There's the double-blind placebo-controlled studies that are ongoing right now that are showing, an impact in fasting on longevity. There's, like you say, the experimental, like really interesting, like, wow, that guy's looking really good and he's been fasting sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But then there's these large populations and subgroups of populations all across the world who have fasted as a part of tradition and culture for hundreds, thousands of years. And there's pretty good evidence from these groups as well.
Right. Well, let's name some of them.
The Jains in India.
In India. They're probably the most well-studied group. And that there's scientific evidence that they have the most number of people over 70 in good health than any other religion.
Than any other group in India.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And a lot of people go, oh, well, the Jains are also vegetarian, but lots of people in India are vegetarian. And the Jains are even doing better than them.
Yes. And we'll get to the vegetarian diet and what the science says about that versus a meat-based diet. But there are other religions. Christians fast. There's Ramadan for Muslims. These are not just coincidences. These aren't just religious practices. It's clear that humanity has figured out that you feel better, you look better, you ultimately are disease resistant. You might even help cure diseases by going through these periods of being hungry or at least not having food in your tummy. Why? Because it activates these 3 longevity defenses that we just mentioned.
Now let's get into these really interesting, like sort of gold standard studies. There is one out of the Baylor College of Medicine. It was run by Isa Mendikoglu. This was published just last year, and it showed that fasting from dawn to sunset for 4 weeks improved blood pressure, reduced BMI, decreased waist circumference, and this is the important part, I mean, it's all important, but it upregulated DNA repair proteins. This is what we saw in all these model organisms as well.
Yeah, there are dozens of studies showing that periods of fasting is beneficial to people who are obese, not just because they lose weight, but they turn on their body's defenses. They become more insulin sensitive and their glucose levels come down. Also showing that people of regular weight, like me, can benefit from fasting. There's a number of studies there. And these are all in the show notes if somebody wants to go and check them out. But what's really interesting is that certain diseases, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, even cancer, those diseases seem to also benefit from fasting, including when you combine chemotherapy with fasting. You get this double benefit for many types of cancers. And then the final point that I think is really interesting is you can mimic fasting, say metformin. A number of doctors prescribe metformin to patients with prostate cancer because more studies are showing that these mimicries, these molecules that mimic fasting or combinations of both will help you beat cancer.
And to you, when you see a bunch of different disease states being affected, you don't think that what's happening is that each of these individual diseases is being played upon. You think that the thing upstream, the aging, is being affected, right?
Yeah, well, more specifically, those 3 defense components in the cell, they take care of the body, not just for aging, but to fight diseases. In young people, middle-aged, genetic diseases, even something you might not think of, like macular degeneration, has been shown to be slowed down and even reversed by fasting.